The path of product development and entrepreneurship is challenging. That's why we talk with industry experts who share their uncensored advice in order to help you, the next generation of innovators and entrepreneurs, successfully take your ideas from conception to fruition. This is The Variable.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Variable Design Podcast. My name is Russ Clough. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We like to hit you guys with some truth and knowledge right out the gate. We do have an excellent program, but we've had a lot of changes. But you can always expect to have one thing stay consistent. I will be here, and our trusty co-host, Andre Cotan, is as well. Andre, you here with me, brother?
I am, and
awesome.
Good afternoon, good morning to everyone.
Hey, everybody. Okay, I've got a story to tell you guys. Here, let me kill the music. It can be a little bit distracting. Just the other day, I got a phone call that has led to a whole series of new excellent changes in my life, and it is going to drive the topic of our introductory Food for Thought segment. And that topic is you are a brand. Now, I said that there's a story that goes along with this. There was a phone call. Somebody not too long ago called me up just the other day, and they said, Russ, I need to expand my design department and recruit new people. And I don't even want to open up a job listing. I just want to hire you. Are you interested in talking with the CEO? And this opportunity just dropped in my lap. And I largely attribute that to the fact that I've built relationships with people, built connections, and those connections have paid for themselves over time. And so, topic of you are a brand. You might not think of yourself as a company, as something that's a formal entity that people associate with, but what branding truly is the feeling people get when they think about you, think about your work. So my question to kick things off for our Food for Thought, Andre. Oh, by the way, I'm going to hit the 5-minute timer. Make sure we don't go over. Andre, what are some of the things that people need to focus on in order to build their personal brand? Or do you have any counter arguments? You're always good at that, having some kind of a counter argument or a different perspective on things. I'm saying that everybody has their own brand. Are you in agreement with me here, Andre?
I do.
Okay.
We all have a reputation that we build, right? And some of that is technical and capability centric, and some of it is human centric, right? Like, are you easy to work with, right? Are you fun to work with? Are you a good person?
Yeah.
And sometimes a lot of these things can compensate. So maybe you have the personality of a door. But your technical skills are just out of this world, and so you can compensate for it, right?
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it's a complete package that makes up your personal brand.
It definitely does. Okay, so I think we're in alignment there. You pointed out something that I think is important. We can spend all the time in the world developing our technical skills, and they can, in some way, make up for lack of character, but I think that that's an important thing. Do you play well with others? Do people like you? And honestly, those things matter when you're trying to get a job. And so taking time to build a reputation for yourself in some way, shape, or form is almost as important as building your portfolio. And it might be something that we kind of glaze over. So I guess I have a couple points in mind. I'll start with one, to main takeaways then, the therefore what? Because here on the show, we like to give you guys nuggets of truth, knowledge, little variables of wisdom. So that takeaway that I have is, when's the last time you've talked with somebody that you trust deeply or a former employer and asked them wholeheartedly, what was it like to work with me? Or what is it like to collaborate with me? And if you do not like what you hear, then that can be something for you to point out and work on, so that ultimately in the long run, you don't shoot yourself in the foot. So that's one of my therefore what's. Andre, when it comes to personal branding, relationship building, and progressing your career in the long run in your personal brand, what are some variables that you can share with and spit knowledge to our audience on?
Sure. Don't forget about the human element. There's so many times where I go into like week-long workshops where we dive into the technical, and it's all about the final product and the requirements and all the stakeholder voices. And at the end of the day, the real work gets done after the workshop at the bar with a few martinis, where we actually connect on a human level, right? This is where those relationships are built. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bar or anything, but just the key point is, don't forget about the actual relationship side. As much as delivering on time and all the rest of the things that build up that complete package, don't forget about the actual human element, right? So especially these days where remote work is more prevalent, I would encourage you to turn on those cameras, remind them there's a human on the other side of it, or do so, or meet in person at least once in a while to just to break that little barrier of disconnect with a good old handshake and a martini, man. Nothing beats it.
Yeah, definitely. I was just, as you were sharing that advice with us, I was thinking about some other things. Not long ago, we had Scott Henderson. Well, it was a while ago. Can't believe it. This is now our 4th season of the show. Scott Henderson was early on, I think in season 2. Regardless, I remember talking with him, and he specifically mentioned the importance of spitting out content and not making your design work so sacred that you won't share or do anything until it's perfect. Perfectionism, keeping your content bottled up until it's perfect is limiting the availability of people getting to know you and associate certain things with you. And so my friends and I we call it the Durango effect, because as soon as my friend bought a Dodge Durango, suddenly he saw them everywhere on the street. And you need to give all of the people that you're connecting with Durango effect moments in their life where you are, because you've spit out lots of content that people can associate with you, then by the time your application comes across their desk, that's our timer. By the time it comes across their desk, they recognize who you are and they associate some emotional feeling to you. Okay, guys, we've cut our we're cutting our food for thought segment short here, and we're going to cut to a quick commercial break. Stick with us, and we'll be introducing our guest speaker right when we get back. All right, everybody, welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker, the one and only Joey Zeledón. Joey is an industrial designer who helps objects find their purpose in life. He works with objects to address their challenges and unlock their full potential by designing for user needs, emotional connection, and business constraints, all within a compelling object narrative identity. Is it a printer, or could it be furniture that prints? Is it a coffee maker, or could it be a barista in your kitchen? Is it a waiting room, or could it actually be your living room at the hospital? In 2022, he founded a design studio based on this approach, creating purposeful objects for people and market differentiation for clients. Prior to starting his own practice, he led design teams over the past 15 years while working for some of the best companies in the industry. He began his career designing shoes for Clarks. He then made the transition to design consulting, first working for Design Continuum in Boston, and then working for Smart Design in New York City and London, where he spent several years designing products and experiences for companies like OXO, PepsiCo, Google, and Ford, and was a co-founder of Smart Design's Food Lab. Then, Steelcase recruited him to be the principal designer for their health category, where he designed connected furniture for healthcare spaces. He then went on to work for HP in Barcelona as the head of industrial design, where he led the integration of printing technology into furniture archetypes. His design has garnered over 40 awards and have been featured in publications such as Design Milk, Dezeen, Fast Company, Interior Design, New York Times, and Taschen. He's also the author of Touchy, a book about emotional ergonomics, which he has given dozens of workshops on. He currently serves as the advisor to MICA's product design program and is a proud alumni of RIT Industrial Design Program. Joey, thanks for joining us here on The Variable, man. We're glad to have you with us today. Hey, Joey, how's it going, man? Oh, man, I think you're muted, bud. It's all right. That's just the byproduct of going live. There's going to be at some point where we're like, oh, no, we have a hiccup. You're finally here with us. Man, I'm so excited. It's been a good haul. We've tried to get in touch with you for a while. I'm just on the topic of personal branding. I got to say, folks, if there's anybody who has just done a stellar job of creating a personal brand, this is Joey Zeledón. If you haven't, I recommend that you guys go check out his work on Instagram, on Behance, on your social channels. Where can people find you, Joey? I got to drop it right at the gate in case people we lose them at the end. You're one of those people that you got to connect with.
Yeah, I mean, my website is simple, firstlastname.com, joeyzeledon.com. You can check out my website, services, everything else.
All right. Very cool. All right, Joey. Well, like I said, thanks again for joining us here on the show. We have an excellent lineup put together for you guys. In fact, I just out of habit like to just hit you with at least a taste at the beginning so that you can stick around and get some more of the knowledge that we've put together for you. So the taste of knowledge is right here. When it comes to topics that we're going to discuss with Joey today, we asked him, what are your PowerPoints? What are your big variables that you want to hit us with? And that's what these are. The main points here: be open to new paths, ugly design on purpose, pivot and expand, go on adventures and don't make decisions based on fear, go beyond things, design at different scales, work in different cultures, invest in yourself and your side projects, and celebrate how far you've come. And we're going to cover all of that today. But the first thing that I want to do, your request, Joey, usually we save this for the very last question of the show, but I want to start with it today. We have to get the special music. You see, Joey, the Variable Design Podcast is called The Variable because we all don't suck on purpose. We have mentors and people who are out there who give us nuggets of knowledge that help us improve as creatives. So, Joey, now that we've got the theme song going, we need to know, what is your variable and your advice that you would share with people beyond those ones that we mentioned? What's your core catalyst for success that you'd say has made the biggest difference in your life?
You know, I really think it's storytelling is my variable, and really the epitome of what I value most in design, in good design. And I think you really hit on it when you were you read my bio, right? I like to say that I help objects find purpose in life, and what that means really is just designing things to be meaningful. And how do you do that? You look beyond the things, right? You look at the context that those things live in. You look at all of the cast and characters that are around the objects. You consider the choreography around it. I mean, it's so much more. Industrial design is so much more than the objects, the things, the products, whatever you call them, right? It's that's how to make it really meaningful and interesting. And I always like to use theater as a metaphor to really drive home the importance of considering context and contextualizing things, because in theater, right, you have props, which are really the objects that we design, and the props are never the star of the show, right? The props are just there to enable something larger, some larger story, you know, where you have cast characters, setting, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, long story short, my variable.
That's a good variable. And wow, as far as like, you just bent my brain a little bit. I think as industrial designers, it's almost like the motivation behind what we do. It's like we're trying to make the props the star of the show. At least that's how we somehow want things to be interpreted. It's like for somebody to hold our thing that we've designed and just be blown away. Oh, wow, that is so cool. And I know that there's like the motif of minimalism, less is more. We want it to be unobtrusive, but it's almost like we've made it like we want people to be astonished with our minimalist solutions. If that makes sense, just blown away with how beautiful our simple thing is. But in truth, it should just be completely unobtrusive and not even noticeable. It's not the prop isn't leading the stage; it's the characters. Anyhow, go. Feel free to elaborate.
That's right. I mean, yeah. That's a really good point, and it should be said that it depends on the touch point, you know, across the experience, right, of kind of an object's life cycle, if you will, right? Because there are moments when those objects, actually the props, whatever, do need to be a star a bit, right? And I think point of purchase, right, direct to consumer sales, like what does it look like on Amazon or Instagram, whatever, it still needs to tell a story. But I think maybe it's more so in like the usefulness of it. Once you know, people choose to invest in our designs, you know, they have it and it arrives in their home, and then they put it to use. Maybe once it's within their lives, embedded in their everyday lives, that's maybe where the theater metaphor really comes to life.
Interesting. Andre, any thoughts? Any something that you want to add to that before we move on to our first point? I want to give you an opportunity to elaborate and jump in as well.
Oh, I was just listening to his entire resume, and I'm like, hot damn! Like, what have I done with my life? So
right?
It is an honor. It is an honor to have you here.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
Definitely. Okay. Well, as I said earlier, I'm going to pull it up again so we can see it. The first thing that we want to talk about is being open to new paths. So, when we discussed things before, because we prepped for this event, you wrote that down. Be open to new paths in design school, from shoe obsessed to story obsessed. That's not a bunch of detail. I want you to elaborate. Why, of all of the points to say is number one, did you choose be open to new paths as the first thing that you're going to share with young designers out there?
Yeah, I think I put that one first. Well, mainly because that list is sequential along my, more or less sequential along my career path. Okay. But I think that one is nice to start with because for me, at least in my experience in my career as an industrial designer, it really set the tone and kind of the trajectory of, you know, where I ended up and why and how. And basically what I mean by that, and from my own story, is that ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a shoe designer for whatever reason. I was fascinated by, you know, Nike and all that stuff. So I was one of those, you know, shoe kids in design school.
To say that you're a shoe kid is putting it lightly. I found a bio online just the other day. Just a side story for all of you guys. Joey wrote a letter to Nike, wasn't it? As a kid, right. With a proposed design with a little sketch thrown into it. And I'm a little bummed that the story doesn't end with them at least responding to you and that's what fueled my dream for design. It doesn't always work out that way. It's too bad we don't have any Nike executives as part of our fan base, because, you know, this would be the moment where I'd say, so Joey, and then I push the button and then some guy comes on, he says, I've got your letter.
Oh my God, that would be
that would be epic, but unfortunately, not. Anyhow, I didn't mean to derail you. So yes, shoe fanatic. You wrote a letter as a kid. How old were you? Like 7 or 8 years old?
Exactly, 7 or 8. You got it. And honestly, I would just like the letter back. If anything,
I just want the letter back.
I would like to frame it or put it on my mom's refrigerator or something at this point.
Dear Nike people, if you have it, please send it back.
And so yeah, that anecdote really, shows you how crazy I was about shoes and shoe design. And somehow I knew someone somewhere was getting paid to to design these things that, back in the 90s, I would love going back to school, shoe shopping with my mom, and we would hit up all the stores and Foot Locker. And just to see, what's so fascinating about shoes is they're displayed, at least in a brick and mortar retail store, on a wall, right? So you never, it's such a difference between how you're actually using the shoe, but in a way it's up on a pedestal, something to be worshipped even, which is really fascinating. But anyways, so I used to do all these little doodles and designs, and I'm sure they were garbage, but for a little kid,
they were cool.
I was really focused on. Yeah. And so I had one specifically that was like, this is it. This is like the design. And so I wrote a little letter and put it in an envelope and brought it to the local Foot Locker in upstate New York, where I'm from, and asked them, can you please mail this into Nike headquarters for me? It's one of the designs I want to propose.
Some store. Maybe we need to rephrase it. It probably we need to find whoever that employee was from the Foot Locker. They're the ones that still have your probably never left the store.
That's right. So I need to go back home.
Yeah, there you go.
Hunt people down. But malls are dead now, so.
Right. So you went from being shoe obsessed in the notes that you have here to story obsessed. So what was that transition like, and was there something that served as a catalyst to make that change for you in your career over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I ended up studying at RIT in Rochester, New York. So Rochester Institute of Technology, their industrial design program, and graduated in 2006. And so going into that program, I was dead set on having every project I worked on was going to be shoe related.
Right.
And so anything else was just kind of a nuisance to me and kind of annoying, right? Because I was so laser focused on this one thing of becoming a shoe designer. And luckily for me, the professors I had, which were outstanding, they really nudged me towards things beyond footwear. Other objects, but most important,
do something besides a shoe.
I was in one class where we had to design some kind of fan design or circulation system, and I was like, I'll embed it into a midsole of a sneaker, So I always found a way. But eventually I did take on some other projects like the furniture course. It was like, how can I make, there's no way. So I had to design furniture. And long story short, the non-shoe projects that I worked on ended up being the most fulfilling and fascinating. And that provided me the most growth, because then I started to understand, I think, design a little bit better, less about this obsession with a thing, and see it more as like good design is about storytelling, and that's the intangible side of design. So that, in a way, that was this moment where it planted the seed for that really impacted my trajectory in my career.
Definitely.
That what we're gonna say?
Andre,
did you have a point where you had to? Yeah, did you have a point where you had to internally struggle on feeling like you're gonna let go of a dream of I'm gonna design shoes and I'm gonna be God's gift to shoe design and transform this? Was this a moment in time in which you can recall having this internal conversation, or even external if you've involved other people, or is this something that slowly happened over time?
I think it was more gradual, honestly, because I did end up being a shoe designer. That was my first job.
Okay.
Graduating, so that might be a good actually segue into the next
Yeah,
to the next.
definitely, because the next point that you talk about is ugly design on purpose. And in the notes, you mention your first design job where you had to design ugly shoes for frumpy dads and learned early on that good design is not universal. So please elaborate. So you've answered Andre's question. You didn't really necessarily have to let go of the dream, but it sounds like you were enlightened from the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I should say, so I had 2 internships while I was in school. One was with New Balance and another with Clark's. And so I got a nice range of experience, let's say, relatively speaking, within the shoe world, right? New Balance being more athletic and Clark's being more of this casual lifestyle. And so I ended up getting a job offer from Clark's. And so I took the job and was there for just under 2 years. And in the span of that 2 years, I lost count of how many shoes I designed, honestly.
Sure.
You know, and there were some really good ones in there that had good stories, but other ones I struggled with finding a story, you know, and I think that's where that kind of helped me make the transition and realize I needed to kind of pivot and expand beyond that. Mm-hmm. But to bring it back to your question about really the name, I guess this is the name of this whole conversation, right? Which ugly I think is
design, yeah,
exactly, ugly design on purpose. I mean, that's just a super provocative title to really you know, get at what I really learned early on in my career, which was, you know, like you said it, Russ, I had to try to design something for someone who was the opposite of me at the time, right? It's and no offense to these to these middle-aged fathers out there. I mean, I'm practically middle-aged now. I'm not a father, so you know, it comes full circle. But I remember designing. You know, this was in 2006, 2007 time frame, trying to design for this customer in a way that, and it seems really obvious now, but like I was designing as if it was for me to wear, right? And I was making it, you know, really sexy in a way, you know, and really stylish. And my manager there, Glenn Arentowitz, I want to call him out by name because he was a great manager and taught me so many great things about shoe design. He asked me, well, would this customer want to wear that? You know, why are you making it look the way you're making it, right? Why are you making it so flashy? Because he told me, you know, these people you're designing for, they actually don't want to call attention to their shoes. They want to look down at their feet and see kind of like super, almost nothing in a way, right? Which is, and this is, you know, it should be said that shoe design does overlap a bit with fashion, right? So there is a difference here. When we talk about universal design, I mean, like there are some things that could be considered universal design, maybe more on the functional side of design. But when you're talking about aesthetics, no way in hell is there such a thing. And so, anyways, long story short, you know, that little talk we had really changed, you know, my perspective and made me realize I need to dig in more into who I was designing for and really try to understand, like, why don't they want their shoes to be flashy? Why don't they want it to look this way, the cool way, I thought, you know? And it's, again, it seems so obvious to say it now, so, you know, this far into my career, but like as a young designer just starting, it was, you know, it made a world of difference. And so then from that point on, I designed a whole bunch of, you know,
ugly
uncool,
shoes. Well, there's something to be taken away from that. You know,
yeah,
we think things need to look a certain way, and in truth, what might be ugly to you is actually spot on for somebody else or for the use case, or, you know, a shoe that looks great but doesn't work right for the user. You know, there are steel-toed boots and they have a very specific look and function because, gee, a construction worker doesn't want to lose the end of his foot, you know, in an accident or something. And so given those parameters, it's going to look a certain way. And so it could be innately ugly to you, but it works right. So
the irony here is that that aesthetic has in a way become cool again. Well, I don't know. It had a moment, right, where
like Doc Martens and
yeah, kind of. You know, I think a lot of it is like Gen Z coming up in the ranks and like, you know, I think Gen Z loves to. It's all about the irony, right? They love to take the working working person's aesthetic and like flip it on its head or elevate it, blah blah blah. So
yeah,
that's the world of fashion.
That it certainly is. Okay, next point
so
that we
I
want.
would say at the
He's
end of the day,
jump in. Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, I have to here because at the end of the day, I don't think you created ugly products, right? Like I think we as humans, we universally have some, I would say pretty close to universally, some objective things that are just not pleasant to look at, to feel, whatever, right? And I don't think you created that, right? I don't think that you'd have been able to find the success that you've had if you did. I think from your perspective, you're like, yeah, I'm not putting that on my feet, right? Because you have your own taste and your own visual thing that you're trying to communicate externally to others with your style and your design language. But at the end of the day, I think you were, through your manager's guidance, you're able to really put yourself in the position of the end user and make something that wasn't ugly to them, but something that they were in fact needing and wanting.
Exactly.
Does that sound about right?
100%. You know, and I think it's a difference between designing for yourself and being, an artist in a way, and designing for a specific customer. So, yeah.
And there's certainly another takeaway that we can pull from that kind of story when you're talking about designing ugly on purpose. There's going to be situations where you have a client who's dead set on having some specific aesthetic. The one I keep on going to, like, they're set on hot pink, and every bone in your freaking body is telling you, do not, for the love of Pete, make it hot pink, but you have to suck it up and just do it anyway, because it's your job to give the client what they need, give the user what they need. And even if it doesn't agree with you in your heart, it's your job to do the design work. So you have to suck it up. And sometimes you got to do what you think is ugly design on purpose. Okay. In that segues. Oh no! One more point. Go ahead.
I was like, we could be on this all day, man.
I know, seriously.
I mean, let's face it, this is like kind of the flagship topic here.
Yes.
But anyways, I was going to say there is another strategic way of designing ugly on purpose to get, in a way, the client to choose the design you believe in. And that's just about framing, right? So sometimes, and it's an old school trick in design consulting where you intentionally design unpleasant solutions. And if you put it next to the one that you really want to be chosen, it really brings that one front and center. So that's another.
Joey, we've talked about that before, the red herring into the portfolio, the solution portfolio. Man, it is a divergent topic because I've done this. I think we've done it in school and also professionally. And sometimes you get bit from that one. You're like, yeah, I would like to show you like option A, which is your throwaway, right? Like this is the worst possible thing. And they're like, I love it. We're moving forward with this. And you're like, shoot, right? You dig yourself into a hole.
That's true.
There is always that possibility that happens.
yeah, you're so right. It can backfire, absolutely. So you got to be careful with that one.
So at the end of the day, like this is a topic we've spoken about before. Is like I like the idea of standing behind everything you say and doing your best to advise and guide and educate your stakeholders so that they can still come to their own decision. It is their responsibility and their prerogative to do so. But at the end of the day, it's theirs. And it's our responsibility to make sure that they do so in the most educated manner, right? And with our guidance. But at the end of the day, it's also on us to put our name on the product we design. And so it is a privilege to be able to say no, right? It is, right? We still got to put food on the table at the end of the day and all that. And so each of us have to figure out where those mountains are, where we will not cross or we will not climb and be able to walk back down and start over. And sometimes it's worth it and sometimes it's not. And I forgot who we spoke to before where there has been some opportunities where you kind of let yourself go and say, you know what, pink is not how I'll do it. I would do it. I don't think it's going to be successful if we choose something else, but because I'm going to choose to do this, I'm going to make it the best damn pink thing ever, right? Yeah. Whatever the case may be. and sometimes some new opportunities come out, and 10 years down the road, you're the dude that does pink stuff, and you've made a career out of it, and it's the best decision you've ever made, right? And so, always do your best and learn to figure out which of those mountains to not climb or climb.
Sure.
Yeah, well, so I couldn't have said it any better.
Well, and that does kind of segue. I'm not going to push the sound button because I jinx myself every time I hit the quick music transition, boom, and then we come back anyway. I was going to say, the next thing that we had on our list, and I'll pull it up one more time for context for people. So, pivot and expand. And so you said, how and why I transitioned into design consulting. So you were in the world of working in shoes, for a brand company, and now you're consulting. Why was that a specific point that you wanted to bring up to young designers, and what was the lesson learned from that experience?
Yeah, so this point really is this is the point in my career where I really hit a wall with shoe design, and I was like, you know what? I think this might be the right time to do that, to pivot and expand, meaning pivot to another facet of design. And by doing so, it would expand my opportunities and the things I could learn and how much I could grow, right? And I think, because I was like a year and a half out working as a shoe designer. And the other thing too is I was concerned that I was going to eventually get trapped and be labeled just as a shoe designer, and I really didn't like that. I wanted to just be a good designer, and regardless of what I was designing, because again, it comes back to the storytelling, right? It's about the intangibles, and I wanted to design stories and apply them to the things. And so so this was the moment when I did that, and so I looked around I was in Boston at the time, and researched some design firms in the area, and I ended up landing a job with Design Continuum. And it was, I think that pivot in my career was probably the most important one that really set the precedent for kind of the trajectory I was about to go on. It was and it should be said, like, it's not easy to do that, right? There was a lot of growing pains. I was not really good at first. I had to learn so much about the world of, design consulting, going from in-house corporate to a design firm, and not just any design firm. It was like a heavyweight in a way. So I had big shoes to fill, and I learned from so many people, mentors I had from that experience.
Very cool.
Joey, did you go through this phase where you felt like you said you hit a wall, and was that like, I am a big fish in a small pond, and you want a bigger pond, right? You want to expand your skill sets and portfolio and knowledge of the world, as I think you put it. And when you went to that, and you took that leap into the consultancy world, did you feel like you were no longer that big fish?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say I was a big fish at.
I was saying, just the impression I get of Joey at this point, definitely a guy who is on a high horse, and thinks highly of. he would definitely say he was a big fish, and now he wasn't in the little
very
pond.
Pretentious.
Very pretentious.
Less about a big deal and more like, hey, like my skill sets, I'm no longer learning as much as I was in the past. I'm kind of reaching like a threshold, right?
Exactly. I think for me, it was like I could see my future. Like, it was clear, like, okay, this is just going to keep designing shoe after shoe after shoe, which was like, that was my dream though. So it was like, why am I feeling this way? There was such conflict in my feelings, because at one, on one side of it, I was like, man, this is it. I'm living my dream. I'm designing shoes. What an amazing thing. And getting paid for it. Like, this is what I did as an 8-year-old, and always, you know, it was incredible. But at the same time, I saw, you know, I really recognized that there was just so much more opportunity in kind of going in the harder path, right? The path of the unknown, really. Because I could have continued in shoe design and you know, climbed the ranks and done well for myself. And there's a lot of shoe designers who do that, and props to them. You know, there's, you know, that's also an amazing path. It just, for whatever reason, you know, the tides shifted, and I had to go with my gut.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so for those who are at the crossroads right now, do I go towards working for a big brand company and specialize in one thing, or do I pivot towards consulting? What are some of the things that you would say, you know, questions that they can ask themselves to help them in the direction that's going to be the best fit for them?
The considerations.
Yeah, what are the things that you should, that they're like, okay, I've worked in both places. Ask yourself these questions, and that will help you decide whether or not to go this way towards working for a single company, designing only shoes, for example, or automotive, or whatever that is, or should you go into consulting? Like, what are some things that they should consider? Joey? You don't know. Yeah. May I put you on the spot? That one's not a scripted question. Sorry, we went off script.
Okay, Rick, can you rephrase it? Let's ask it again.
I guess I just want to know, like, advice you would give to young designers that are debating: should I work and apply for jobs for big brands, or should I go to consulting? And I know there's not necessarily everybody should do one or the other. So there's going to be certain things about you as the designer that will help, that would make it so you're going to fit in better with the big brand as opposed to a consultancy. So what's some guiding advice you'd give for those students who are on the fence?
Okay, I have some guidance here. So
okay,
good. You could start anywhere, honestly. You know, just start. Get something that you're interested in, passionate about, like I did, you know, designing shoes. You know? Just start with something, and there's always room to do that pivot and expansion, right? But keep in mind that, and the way that I now reflecting back on that decision and why it was so important to me is because now I realize, like, what I was doing was really applying the you know, the design process to my own career trajectory. You know, in the design process, we always talk about casting a wide net early. You know, fail fast, fail often, as much as you can up front. And that's basically for your career. It's just about creating more diversity in your experiences, right? Because really you get to a point where you hit a certain age and you're like, okay, I think now might be nice to specialize, to focus in one area. And I think for me, focusing too quickly in my career, then it limited the things I could do and learn as I went throughout my career. And I felt like in my gut at the time that would have led to a crisis of some sort, right? Like a midlife crisis or something. And I was worried. I was thinking about the future, Joey, like, oh my God, I don't want that to happen. So I was trying to, like, prevent it, right? Like 10 years or 15 years of the future. So, but anyways, basically the takeaway here is consider applying the design process to your own career and life even.
There you go. Okay. And that does kind of segue into our next segment, because you said, as a piece of advice for people, you know, after we pivoted and expand, talked about how you transitioned to design consulting. The fourth point that you made on your list is to go on adventures and don't make decisions based on fear. So, I mean, you could almost say that just directly to that question we had before. Don't make decisions based on fear if you're afraid of somehow having that midlife crisis by going one way or another. Explore things. I know that wasn't what you were driving at when you wrote this, so I'll pass the mic straight over to you and I'll let you elaborate. But what were you driving at when you were saying, you know, go on adventures and don't make decisions based on fear?
Yeah, and I guess that could be applied to many different points in my career. You're right,
Sure.
but like the specific point I was referring to here was actually when I was at Design Continuum. I had been there for 4 years, and this was like in the heart of the Great Recession, if you recall. And at that point, I had survived like 2 rounds of layoffs at the firm, and I felt like in a way, my time was numbered. Who knows? But
The writing was on the wall.
yeah, possibly. I don't know. Who knows, really? But I also was 27 around ish, so I feel like I did have a quarter life crisis in a way, and there was something that I was kind of wanting to do and had been. It was always on my bucket list, which was move to Costa Rica and spend a year abroad. I never did a study abroad when I was in design school because I couldn't afford it at the time.
It's okay, most of us can't.
Right.
Don't feel bad.
Yeah, it's a tough one to swing financially, when you're I was just happy to be in design school. So so that was on my bucket list, and I just felt like, you know what? We're in this recession. I felt like I was just surviving and not thriving. And also I had nothing to lose in a way. Like, I had no responsibilities beyond just my job. And so I was like, you know what? Let's do this. And so I told my manager, like, I quit,
You just took the leap and straight up did it, huh? Wow.
Yeah, and I'm moving to Costa Rica, and I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to see I'm going to learn Spanish, spend time with family. My father is from Costa Rica. I should have said that.
Okay.
So I have that's my heritage. So I really wanted to get in touch with my roots, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what I did. Yeah. And I have zero regrets making that decision. And looking back, I think I would have regretted not taking the leap at that time. It was like, what's one more year at a job than, diversifying again your experience. And I do recognize, like, it sounds like a very privileged thing to be able to do that, which it was, but it was also really risky. I didn't know. In the back of my head, I was fearing, like, oh my God, if and when the time comes, I want to come back to, the design industry. Can I make it happen? Do I have enough to stand on? Right? Will people, am I still employable? What is this going to lead to? This excursion, this sabbatical, in a way.
Interesting.
But yeah, I did it, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, lots of things to take away from that. We have a couple questions that have come through the chat here on YouTube that I want to make sure we do our due diligence and address with you before we run out of time, because there's only so much time in the lunch hour. It says right here from Jorge Rojas, nice seeing you, Joey. Can you tell us about how, through the evolution of the touchy-feely, make you create this new trend of designing ugly on purpose? Is there a connection? I read that word for word. So,
okay.
So when it comes to the evolution of touchy-feely, has this impacted the trend of designing ugly on purpose? Is there a connection?
That's a great question and super deep.
Yeah. You're like, I haven't thought about that before.
I really haven't. I would say, yeah, there's definitely a connection, because touchy-feely was all about understanding emotional ergonomics, right? So in the physical touch points, the touchies, it's all about considering what are the feelies. And the feelies were, it's the context around the thing, the touch point, the interaction, right? What is the person thinking, feeling, saying, doing? Who else is there? What else is in the environment? So it's really about that, again, bringing it back to the theater metaphor. And within that, you'll discover the middle-aged dads, who don't want flashy footwear, shoes, right? Yeah. That's part of it. That's definitely part of understanding the context, going beyond the shoe itself to understand, these middle-aged dads don't want attention. They just want to just live their lives, It's a generalization, but yeah. So answer is yes, they are connected.
They are connected. There you go.
I was going to say, Joey, without that empathy too, you probably would have created, in fact, ugly shoes for them, right? If you didn't have that empathy, right? Like, here's some gold trim, here's some cheetah print on the back, and your dad's going to look at it and like, hell no.
Hell no. Okay.
These ain't invisible.
Right. Okay, there's another one that came in through here that we'd like to hit real fast, Joey. From Vignier, they say, "Hi, Joey. What are your thoughts on AI?" And I imagine that has to do in reference to these new AI-generated artwork concepts and so forth. I mean, take a quick stab and tell us what are your thoughts on that? How is that going to impact the future of design, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I mean,
Sure.
If anyone has a license or something, I'd love to try it out.
Sure.
I feel like I'm a latecomer to that and many things regarding, new technology on the horizon. But from what I've seen, I'm really not worried about it.
Sure.
In terms of it eroding the value that we bring to design, because and I don't like to get stuck on and latch onto like emerging technology and all these things, because to me it's not timeless. This technology will continue to change and evolve and get better and crazy, blah blah blah. But like at the end of the day, like when we're talking about good design, it takes so much more than just inputting some kind of inputs and then it spits out something. Like I think the world of illustration, in artists and concept artists, those are the ones who should be more fearful.
Sure.
But I think with design, it's just so much more complex, right? The things that we have to think about.
There's the whole human
And
element.
at the end of the day, right, it's just a tool.
Yeah, it's a tool.
Exactly.
I agree.
Perfectly said. It's just a tool, just like everything else that has come before, from like, VR sketching to whatever, it's just, they're great tools. But at the end of the day, good design is not about using the best tool. You can use a crayon and a piece of paper and you can still do good design.
Well, and then
right.
another
So
point.
focusing on the conversation around solely the tool or the technology, as you put it, Joey, is a moot point and a false step, right? It's at the end of the day, we have our tools. This conversation happened eons ago when they're like, oh my God, there's digital sketching on the computer.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's the end of our industry.
Oh, no.
And the folks holding the Copic markers are going, and the Huffies, I forgot the other brand. But they're like, this is the end of our career, right? This is the end. Right. And we have 2020 vision looking back. We get to go and say, we were those fears, and they were loud and communicated, saying, just like they are today, as they're getting louder, of this is the end of the world or of our careers and so on. And no, it's just changing.
It's just change.
And it will, and to Joey's point, it will continue to change. Thank God.
Right. Thank goodness.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and we certainly, when Keyshot came out, that didn't put us out of a job, because there always has to be, we're in the business of creating physical design and that connect with people on an emotional level. And you can put in, I think like you said, it's a tool. I think for iteration, it can help inspire some of the things that ultimately we, as the creatives, will have to put into practice and make a reality and bring to fruition. And so if that just expedites our creative process, then by all means, I think we can embrace it and use it for its intent, but to somehow fear that it's putting us all out of a job, or somehow think that business
It's just fear mongering.
Yeah, it's fear mongering. Okay.
And it goes with like 3D printing and all the rest.
Yeah, exactly. And we could dedicate a whole discussion just on the topic of AI, but we're only on number 5 and we're running out of time. And so we may or may not be able to hit on every single thing. Just to recap for you all, guys, I'm putting it on the screen. And so we're talking about going beyond things is the point that we're on right now. You said working at Smart Design really solidified your approach to storytelling and contextualizing tangible things. So what do you mean by go beyond things when you're telling people some advice?
Yeah, I think, and this one, we don't need to go deep on this one. I think we, in a sense, we've already covered it.
Okay.
Going beyond things, contextualizing, it's about the stories, the intangibles, understanding the user needs, the people you're designing for, all of the other inputs that come with designing something meaningful for people. And I think, because I had, at Design Continuum, I experienced that. That's why I was really introduced to human-centered design. I know it's life-centered design now. But smart design was kind of, I think I was finally up and running at smart design. I was more seasoned. And so that was the point in my career where I really came into my, going full steam ahead and understanding and really putting it into practice in a really thoughtful way. And I think, from that came some really exciting, fun projects, that was really thankful to get to work on.
Cool. Okay.
I was like, in addition to that, I was going to say to go forward also is that a lot of times stakeholders don't know to ask for something that they don't know exists. Another, right? Like they only have the language and the knowledge that they're stepping into that realm with you with. And so part of your job is also going past what they have not. You deliver what's been asked of you, right? But part of it is also that education aspect and going and bringing them and exposing them to what is what we call the art of the possible.
Yeah, exactly. That's so well put. And we can go super deep on it. I mean, but like,
we'll just have to have you back, Joey, and then we'll
yeah,
and we'll go deep on there. There we go.
I don't want to get into it because this can go. Yeah, it could be a time.
Certainly. Okay. Well, if we're gonna leave that, then the next thing that we wanted to hit was design at different scales, growing pains from the transition between small scale to large scale objects. This is something that I don't really think about. We can almost do a broad paint strokes and say, well, design is design, small or big. But I think there's a lot of implications in different approaches to when you're designing something that's a large thing as opposed to small objects. And so there's something obviously from that experience that you learned. Why don't you share your insights with us on what your experience is like when it comes to designing various products at different scales?
And Joey, before you do, it's not just the way I interpret that question is not just physical scale, but scale of the project. So everything from 5 stakeholders to, let's talk about, like in my realm of my professional career, of 8,000.
That's right. That's a really good reframe of that question. So yeah, so my career up until that point, at Smart Design, I started with shoes, so designing things around people's feet. I went into consulting, worked on, projects for OXO, so designed tools to be used in people's hands and put in drawers. I worked on things for PepsiCo, so like some food-related projects, people put in their bodies and mouth, right? So it's thinking about all these touch points. And then also while at Smart Design, one project I worked on that did actually scale up was a project for Ford, where we were tasked with designing a new ride-sharing service that was to be a competitor to, the Ubers and Lyfts of the world at the time. And this was the largest scale that I had worked on, right? And also, so scale in terms of physical scale, but also to your point, the complexity, because we were designing not just for one user, but now it had to do with passengers and the driver, right? And the choreography and relationship and communication, sight lines, all these things. It was super complex. And the experience, it was experience design, service design in a way. There was touch points throughout, which is where the industrial design really, came to life. But that was really that project was super interesting, and I learned so much, and about body storming, and that was like that was the point where I was like, oh my God, this is theater. This is totally theater. We're really doing it here. Tape lines on the floor to represent the chassis of the bus and the vehicles, and bringing in other people to act out different scenarios. It was truly theater, and that was eye-opening. And so basically, I think it was because of that project and some other things that I was then recruited and hired by Steelcase to be the principal designer for their healthcare category of designing connected furniture in healthcare spaces. And so that was kind of leaning more into larger scale things, right? So not just like singular furniture, like a chair, a sexy chair on a pedestal, but it was like spaces, considering the flow of people in a space. And especially when you think about furniture within healthcare settings, I mean, it's super complicated and not always sexy, actually never sexy until, I had something to do with it and many others. But it was, that transition was really fascinating, and I loved it.
Wonderful.
That's amazing. Joey, thank you so much for being here. We greatly appreciate your thoughts.
Seriously, bud.
It's my pleasure.
To do the final wrap up, I mean, we touched on working in different cultures, and the only points that you mentioned that we didn't really hit on were investing in yourself and celebrating how far you've come. So if you were to wrap those main points into a single, quick, brief statement of advice for those who are tuning in, what would you have to say about the value of investing in yourself and celebrating how far you've come?
Yeah, so, these are pretty short. I think investing in yourself, that one is really about the importance of side projects and not thinking of them as just hobbies, but they can turn into your career, right? And for me, I mean, I ended up writing my book, Touchy, all about emotional ergonomics. And that was inspired by things that I learned throughout my career as I was designing,
Sure.
And I took the time to really, package it up and make something out of it and put it out into the world. And also my coat check chair, my hanger chair, I think you flashed an image of it in the beginning. And so that one was, a school project at RIT, and that was actually the chair I designed in the furniture studio that I mentioned.
Oh,
and that ended up being one of my favorite projects. I don't know, just in a way it captures my personality and the playfulness of design that I really enjoy. And all of these things really kind of ended up, helped me kind of tie things together in starting my own studio and standing on my own 2 feet and stepping outside of kind of the labels of saying, oh, I'm a principal at Steelcase, head of design at HP, whatever, right? And stepping out on your own, you have to stand under your own brand. And I know you guys know that so well. You talk about it really well. And it's a big step. And to do it, you got to have your own point of view. And I think that's what side projects and investing in yourself and what you believe in what good design is, that's why it's so important. So that way, when you do make that leap, you're ready to go and you have the confidence to do it.
Yeah.
And then the last thing, what was it?
Celebrate how far you've come.
Oh, right. Celebrate how far you've come. This is just a reminder, really, to myself to stop comparing to other people and their accomplishments, right?
Yes.
You just got to compare it to yourself and how far you've come. And that's so important, and keep it positive.
I agree wholeheartedly. Man, Joey, I wish that we had all the time in the world that we could sit here and talk with you. Everybody's got to get back to their workday and so forth. So unfortunately, we're going to have to close our discussion with you. But I wanted to say thank you so much. And you definitely have a history and worth celebrating. Your work speaks for itself. I appreciate the time that the knowledge you've shared with us from your experience. I would encourage those who haven't already done it to reach out to Joey online. He's on LinkedIn. He's on social platforms. Go check him out. Reach out if you have questions. Totally approachable, super nice guy who's willing to help. It's been a pleasure to meet and talk with you. As I'll say thank you, Joey, again. And before we let you go, I just want to remind everybody, because I just have to go down there and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Your support makes the variable possible. We are the variable. As a community, we have the power to make all the difference in the world. Andre, any final thoughts before we let everybody go?
I'm in awe and inspired by you, sir. So thank you so much for joining us.
And inspired. All righty, guys.
It was my pleasure. It was truly a pleasure.
All right. Fantastic. Okay. Well, stay tuned, guys. We'll be sure to give you announcements whenever we have new events coming up. I won't say that we're regularly doing these quite as well as we were in the past. Been in some transition in limbo between the new jobs. I talked about earlier that I got that phone call, talked to the CEO, and now I'm working a new gig. I'll be sure to tell you guys more about that in future episodes. But in the meantime, if you have questions, feel free to reach out, info@thevariable.design. Happy to help you guys out if you're looking for mentorship and so forth. And be sure to check out our other YouTube channel, Pyro Studios. The studios are a collection of creatives, and we are focusing on showcasing the stuff that we talk about here. Lots of exciting things coming forth. All right, keep designing, guys. Stick with it. Be optimistic, and we'll see you next time.